This is Chairman Mike McCoo of the Wellington Board of Finance calling the meeting to order. Regular meeting of the Town of Wellington Board of Finance, Thursday, July 15th, 2021 at 7:05 p.m. Seating of alternates is the first item, and Christina notified me she would not be available and asked to have Lisa seated for her. Lisa is the only alternate I have anyway, so I'll entertain a motion for Lisa Wolf to be seated for Christina.
So moved.
Can I get a second? I'll second that. Marissa, can you call the vote, please?
Matt,
Yes, this is the seat that I was reading.
Place of Christina.
Yeah, I was reading the material you sent over, Mike. So this is the seat replacement for Christina?
This is to seat Lisa for Christina. Yeah, you were a little garbled there.
Yes.
thank you. Pete,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yeah.
Mike,
Yes.
5 yes, 0 no.
Okay, we have approval of minutes next, and hang on, I'm at the desk that has multiple computer screens and 2 mice, so hang on here. Unless Marissa, unless you have the dates right in front of you there.
The dates are June 17th, May 20th, and March 23rd.
Thank you. I'll start with the oldest, March 23rd. Can I get a motion?
Move to approve the minutes. Is it a mover? Is it a approve or accept?
Either is fine.
Okay, approve the minutes of March 23rd.
I'll second that.
Okay, discussion, additions or corrections?
I could just say this is an umbrella thing. I just want to say that, Marissa, I think you're magnificent. I mean, what you hold in your brain and how you write it, because I know this isn't a transcript. This is writing about the things that come to the fore and capturing the discussion. And I really have not, in my years of covering meetings and participating in them, I have not seen someone that's got your skill set. So, so that's why I moved to approve.
Thanks, Steph. I appreciate that.
Any other comments on the minutes of March 23rd? Let's vote.
Pete,
Yes.
Matt,
Abstain?
Stephanie,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
6 yes, 0 no.
Next was May 14th.
May 20th.
I'm sorry. Looking at the wrong calendar here. I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes of May 20th.
So moved.
I'll second that. Discussion, additions or corrections? All right, let's vote.
Lisa,
Yes.
Jeff,
I'll abstain.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Matt,
Abstain?
Mike,
Yes.
4 yes to abstain. Sorry, that last one, it was 5 yes and 1 abstain. I apologize.
Okay. Both motions passed. Okay, and the last one being,
June 17th.
can I get a motion for that?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Oh,
Any discussion, addition or corrections?
no.
All right. Let's vote.
Jeff,
That me, yes.
yeah. Lisa,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Matt,
Abstain?
Stephanie,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
5 yes, 1 abstain.
Okay, that takes care of minutes. On to present to speak. Public participation is desired and encouraged. Speakers will be limited to time and appropriateness of comments to maintain progress, stay on topic, and maintain decorum. So as we traditionally do, if you're supplying video to us, your camera is on, then please wave. We'll call on you first, and then we'll move to the phone callers if need be. Peter Latinchich.
Good evening, Peter Latinchich, 97 Trask Road. I wanted to address the board tonight on my concern regarding the school building roofs. These projects were approved quite some time ago, and I was pleased when the superintendent finally brought on board some professional assistance and was moving these projects forward for that project to be completed this summer. I learned at the Board of Ed meeting Tuesday night that I was able to attend remotely while traveling, that this project has now been suspended. The superintendent also reported in that meeting that the school roofs are both leaking. Not surprising with all the rain we've had, and that he would be contacting Manchester Silktown Roofing for yet additional repairs to both roofs. This does not make a great deal of sense to me. When the project was in progress, it was scheduled for this summer, and the funds were approved by our town in capital projects, in Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, town approval, and town budget approval. I don't understand why we would not be proceeding. I don't understand why we would jeopardize the integrity of the town's two biggest assets. I serve on the school building committee. We don't want to jeopardize any option depending on the final course of action we take with the existing buildings we have, regardless of what they're ultimately used for. I would ask the Board of Finance to review this issue. And until it's resolved and we're on track for roofs on these buildings as committed to by the townspeople, no additional capital funds be released of any kind. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in video? Wave your hand. We'll call on Jim Bullock.
Hi, Jim Bullock, Laurel Drive. I'm echoing the same concerns Peter had. I was chair of the Board of Finance, and we appropriated at that time funds to fix both roofs. I'm very surprised that they haven't been acted upon. If anything, the project was totally put on hold here. So I also strongly encouraging the board to please look into this and do a little due diligence and see what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in video first? If you're not supplying video and you'd like to speak, please unmute yourself. And Catherine, are you coming in to speak? Or are you joining the meeting? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Catherine Viveris. I'm the chairperson for the school building committee, and I'd like to just express my support. And further down the agenda tonight, you'll be voting to appropriate funds for the school building committee. So I guess this would be in direct response to Peter's comment about halting any capital improvement project funds. I do not recommend that. That's why I'm here speaking tonight to let you know that as a school building committee chair, our committee's done quite a bit of work so far, and we've kind of come to a point where we need some professional assistance to help us do some more research on the schools. And in order for us to do that, we need the funding to do that. So I asked the committee to please consider the vote that's going to be on the table tonight to appropriate funds for consulting services for the school building committee. That's going to allow us to continue our research, tap into the professional experts out there to help us evaluate the existing schools and evaluate a possible new school. So without the appropriation of that fund, we're kind of dead in the water at this moment. So please consider that tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else present to speak? If you're not supplying video, unmute and call out your name, please. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else. Okay, put my agenda here. On to old business. Public health crisis update, general update. Do we have, Erica, do you have any general information before we get into the revenue report or the ARPA funding? Do you have any other information such as unemployment numbers or any feedback from local businesses or anything?
No, I don't, Mike. And I anticipate, as you per usual, the unemployment numbers will probably come out tomorrow. I see the governor speaking today about jobs created in June, but I did check prior to this meeting. There's no information on that.
Okay. Anybody else on the board with comments or thoughts, considerations on the update? Okay, let's move on to the June 2021 Treasurer's Revenue Report. Find it on my screens. You all have it. I think there was fairly positive news.
Could I just ask about a couple of things while you're doing that?
Yes, please.
I just wondered if Erica could update us on what's happening with the senior center. We talked about it last month, about their AC.
Later in the agenda, you hear me talk about that stuff.
Oh, okay, thanks. Well,
You're
that,
welcome.
Okay. In reviewing the revenue report from the treasurer, there were comments that I'll point out in the from the treasurer. Couple of highlights she noted. The collection rate is statistically over 100%, $9,500 over that. Interest and lien fees were up above projected. Revenue that was down for the previous fiscal year included bank interest for almost $70,000 lower than budgeted, licensing fees for about $11,000 below, and judicial fees over $12,000 below. Revenue that was up included permits, building fees, etc., conveyance, COVID grant, and town clerk fees for a gain over budget of $241,800. The upshot of the whole deal being that it's a net gain on the budget. Any questions, comments on the revenue report? Okay, federal funding, ARPA, American Rescue Plan. We do have stuff further on the agenda, but in general, Erica, can you give us an update on where we are, guidance, etc.?
Sure, I can tell you that we received our money, so that's a pleasant surprise. So we have in our account now $867,727.11, and approximately 1 year from mid-June, early June, we should be getting the second half of that. And again, it can be used through December 31st, 2024, expended to December 2026. So it has to be encumbered by 2024, and then it gives you some time if you have a longer project to use it. So, and the couple items later on the agenda, we'll talk specifically about how the Board of Selectmen have created a working group to generate potential uses.
Great. Okay, any other board comments, discussion on the public health crisis update and the effect on the budgets? Okay, moving on. Fiscal year 21 transfer for transfer station adjustment. The language for that was sent out to you all this afternoon. And now I have to find here. Okay. Last month it was estimated the transfer station budget would be short 10,000. The Board of Finance approved a $10,000 transfer. Now that all the invoices have been received, the department will need another 10,000. Bulk waste was overspent by just over 7,000, and trash removal was overspent by just over 2,000. Legal is tracking to be underspent by 10,000. Question I have for Erica or Donna maybe is, I want to make sure that we're not running afoul of the rules of what we're allowed to approve. We know that we can approve a $10,000 adjustment within the approved overall budget. But two $10,000 adjustments 2 months in a row, I'm not sure if that would be seen as us essentially approving a $20,000 adjustment just by splitting it in two pieces. And I want to make sure we do not create an error by doing that. Any input?
The adjustments are for appropriations, not for transfers. So since we are not appropriating more money than what was approved by the taxpayers at the referendum, we're just switching between line items in the budget. We can do 2 transfers in a row, or we can do as many transfers as we want. We just cannot do additional appropriations of $20,000. Only one appropriation of $20,000 is the statute.
Okay. Okay, so 2 10s equal to 20. We're now at the limit if we approve these.
No, you're not appropriating money. I think that's what Donna's saying to you, Mike, is that we're transferring within the budget that had already been approved at referendum. So the transfers are acceptable. If we were asking for an appropriation from the general fund, that would be a concern. So you're appropriating new dollars. This is a transfer within funds that were already approved by taxpayers.
Right, I understand that, but we have a $10,000 limit for certain types of things. We have a $20,000 limit for certain types of things, and I realize those are different. I'm trying to make sure I'm clear on what the differences are. Some things have to go to town meeting.
Yeah, I actually know about the $20,000 limit, but I don't know anything about a statute for a $10,000 limit. I don't know. I have to see where you're getting that from.
Okay, so this was what we talked about, and maybe it was my error, but this is what we talked about a couple of months ago when we approved money for the fire department being over budget.
Yeah.
We approved 10,000. They asked for 13. We approved 10,000 because I was of the understanding that that was the limit we could approve based on those circumstances. If I'm misunderstanding the circumstances, then it's probably even better that we get this clear tonight.
I think you're mixing up transfers and appropriations.
Okay.
So what we're doing is transferring.
Okay.
And what you ended up doing, Mike, with the fire department was a transfer. I believe Donna had indicated that there was money within the budget she thought could sustain those dollars. So we ended up transferring. You were originally talking about appropriating new dollars if the budget as a whole couldn't have absorbed the additional funds that the fire department had requested.
So an appropriation would be limited to 10,000 by the Board of Finance only action. whereas a transfer is limited to 20,000.
But the question that I think that Mike hinted at, that I'm kind of curious about is this something that's just going to be repeated? Is there kind of ongoing problems with living within the budget amounts set at the transfer station on bulk waste and trash? Or
I think unfortunately COVID has led to our typical numbers of trash and bulky waste being out of whack. And we're seeing that across different municipalities where everyone is having sort of the same concern with people being at home now. They're generating their trash at home as opposed to in their offices. So with kids home all day, families home all day, we've seen an uptick. We thought maybe it would end with COVID, but people can, the last summer, but with fewer kids going back to school and fewer people going back into the office during the fiscal year. I don't know what the future will bring, Steph. I think you're seeing some people still staying at remote work. I think we might see more kids back in school next year than we did this year. So it's hard to tell.
If it does hold fast, because I have heard you speak on this through the last budget year, is our plan to look for transfers to cover it?
Not necessarily. So that's what happened this year. We weren't prepared for, when we budgeted the year before, we didn't anticipate what everyone staying home would look like. We did ask for an increase, and this board approved that within the transfer station for a couple of reasons last year, and the main one being that our contracted rates increased. So we did increase for this current budget as opposed to this, and so we're looking at the 2021 budget now. So I can't say it will happen again. COVID has certainly changed some things, so our normal trends are not so normal anymore.
Thank you.
Okay, any other board comments, thoughts before we go to a motion?
Yeah, I'm a little unclear. We're transferring from which account to which account?
We're transferring from line item 0141 town council,
Right.
$1,000 to the transfer station. So it's money within the fiscal year 21 approved budget. It's moving it from one department to another. Actually not, yeah, it is one to another.
Okay. Thank you.
Mike, I'm all for taking money away from lawyers and giving it to garbage men.
Okay. For the sake of keeping the agenda moving here, I move that the Board of Finance approves the transfer of $10,000 from line item 0141 town council to line item 0351 transfer station. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay. Now official discussion. Erica, this should wrap up fiscal year 21, correct? We shouldn't expect any more from fiscal 21.
I don't believe so, but I'll defer to our business manager.
I think this should wrap it up.
Okay. Any other board discussion on the motion? Let's vote.
Pete,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
6 yes, 0 no, motion passes.
Okay. Next item of old business is ambulance service to the town of Union. I'd just like to make a comment based on things we learned at the last meeting and feedback from public since that meeting that's come to me. I think the fact that I am associated with one of the 2 fire departments in town is attracting a lot of attention, and it's taking some of the attention off the topic. So I am going to, unless it's a clarification of fact or managing the agenda, I am not going to participate in this discussion tonight. And I'm So I will leave it to the board to discuss and take it from here.
Mike,
Yes.
I got your ambulance bullet points. I think they are all very valid. I've also had a chance to talk to Roger Phillips, who's a selectman in the town of Ashford, as well as being a member of the Ashford Volunteer Fire Department, to discuss they're giving up the PSA for the town of Eastford. I believe that was done at the town of Eastford's request because the town of Eastford was paying the town of Ashford to hold their PSA, and Eastford has since found that their costs have risen dramatically over what they were paying the town of Ashford. Also, Eastford and Ashford sharing such a long border, as we learned last meeting, we were led to believe that we would still be the primary responder for Union, whether we held that PSA or not. As it turns out, with Ashford, they are no longer a responder to the town of Eastford. And it seems to me that we're looking at the economics of holding a PSA exactly backwards. We're looking at it was being sold to us that a PSA was an economic good, that we wanted to have it because it would allow us to offset our budget. It's not our job to make sure that we're collecting as many PSAs as possible. I believe it's the town of Union's job to find somebody to take it. And I think that a PSA is something that if you're not providing it for yourself, you're going to have to pay somebody else to provide it. And I don't see where we should be taking it, thinking that we're making revenue from it, particularly given the bullet points that I previously agreed to. So I think that we should seriously consider following up on this and finding out what the true cost of holding a PSA is. It's a cost to hold a PSA, not a payment to hold a PSA. That's all I got.
Other board members?
Yeah, I guess I want to piggyback on that because the cost that the Wellington taxpayer is sustaining is really quite large. It's pretty much three-fourths of the cost of operating the ambulance overall. So according to the numbers that were provided to us, which was there's like $175,000 offset to about $660,000 full cost of operating the ambulance in fiscal year 22. So that after you take that revenue out, and some of it's offset from the cell tower to payroll for the ambulance, so it's not actually revenue, all of that 175. Anyway, it comes down to 73%, which is quite a large amount. And it's, this isn't something like, this is more a trend of what's going on. The skyrocketing cost of ambulance operation in any town, and the fact that salaries are going up everywhere. And in our town, as pointed out in the fact sheet, since 2007, which was a year before the PSA was entered into, since then, the ambulance payroll has tripled. So it's gone from roughly 200,000 to roughly 600,000. So I know that there's a lot of factors in all of that. And nothing is as simple as it seems when you're looking at total numbers. But I do think that there's an issue with what's happening to the Wellington taxpayer, and not to be too direct about it, but who gets ambulance coverage without paying for it in their town? Who gets it gratis for 13 years?
Union.
And I'm not, when I looked into the details of ambulance services in Connecticut, there's very few towns that hold a PSA, if any, over another town. I think there might be some up by Barkhamsted and a couple of other places, but I don't think that they're unpaid ones. And but I'd like to hear about that if there are some that fall into that. So I think that's the question that's in my mind, especially as healthcare costs overall, and certainly ambulance costs are right in there, are just going off the charts for a lot of reasons that are that you can't really fight. So it's not like we can cut the budget and just tighten our belts, and be nice about it. So that's it.
Chief, I saw you raising your hand. I'm assuming you want to respond to a couple of these.
Sorry, my computer froze up a little bit. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Do you mind if I just jump on Stephanie's question or one of her points real quick?
Yeah, if you have a response to something that was said, feel free.
Yep. So one part of the doubling in the budget is in 2007, 2008, we had 2 people working 10-hour days. We now have 2 people working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's been, I believe it's been since 2010, 2011 that started. So this isn't a new trend. Yes, the payroll did double, but so did the staffing hours.
More than 2, don't we, Alex?
I'm sorry?
You have more than 2 full-time, right?
There's 4 full-time employees, but before there was only 2 people on 10 hours a day, 10 to 12 hours a day. Now there's 2 people there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Before they didn't work holidays, they didn't, as to where now we do.
Thank you, Chief. Matt, I think you had comments.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. That review was very helpful. Is it possible for us to put that on the screen? The review that Stephanie put together?
Is someone handy at screen sharing? If you give me a minute, I can do it. Marissa, do you have that document handy by any chance?
The one that's titled Municipal Ambulance? No. That was
Ambulance
the other one.
service bullet points, I think it was called.
Yeah, I have that.
Could you screen share that, please?
Sure.
And Steph, I just had a couple questions. Forgive me, I try to keep up, but if you can go down, let's see, go down, ambulance costs have been rising sharply. Okay, keep going. Cost analysis. 145,000 estimated revenue from billing and 30,000 from cell phone tower. This leaves a net cost of $482,000, 73% of the total, to be covered by taxpayers. So that means that the residents of Willington are paying $482,000 for ambulance service for our town. And also 10% of the calls go to Union. Is that about right? Am I reading that correctly?
I didn't, yeah, I'm trying to look down the points here.
That in that 482,000, 10% of the calls are going to Union. Yeah, that's roughly that's what the information was that we got.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. I just want to make sure. So a lot of numbers. And then we go through and go through a little bit about the town's emergency services payroll. Can you move down the sheet, please? Then it says 10%. Okay, so the ambulance responds to about 800 calls per year, and about 80 being calls to Union. And then the last bullet was the one I didn't quite understand. The 10% of calls to Union produces about 10% of the billing revenue, leaving 10% of the projected net cost, about $48,200 annually, to the Wellington taxpayers. So what I think that says is 10% of the 482,000. Is that about right?
That's right.
Okay, that's all the clarification I need. But thank you. And by the way, this is extremely helpful for boiling this down in succinctly and in a financial. All this is financial, so very, very helpful. Thanks for putting it together.
Chief.
Somebody just send that, the bullet point thing to me by chance?
I'll make sure after the meeting it gets emailed to you.
Okay, just because I would have rather had that beforehand, so I knew what we were, sorry.
I believe it's all stuff's been talked about already, but I'm glad to make
Okay.
sure I forward it to you.
Thank you.
It was Alex. It was all taken from the presentations when
Okay,
he was here.
thank you.
Lisa?
Do you mind if I address the
Go ahead,
PS?
Chief.
Do you mind if I address the PSA thing real quick?
Go ahead.
So Pete did bring up a point about the PSA in Ashford and Eastford. The differences are different communication centers. You know, we work through Talon County Mutual Aid Fire Services, our dispatch center, who dispatches Willington, Union, Stafford, Mansfield, Ashford. Quinnebog Valley now dispatches for the town of Eastford, but they're also now using KB or Killingly, Brooklyn, I think is the name of it, ambulance service. That's covering 3 or 4 towns up there with one ambulance. That Ashford still does go to Eastford, not as often as they used to, but now they're also relying on Woodstock, etc. But the same is coming the other way, is they're not, the closest ambulance isn't always going to the call, which isn't always beneficial.
Thank you, Chief. Other board discussion? Lisa?
Mike?
I just wanted to thank, the bullet points were excellent, and I just wanted to ask, when you say that it's 10%, I know that these are all numbers that were gathered, but I wanted to ask the chief, you know, could it be possible that just because there are 80 calls of the 800 that go to Union, could it be possible that that number even be higher than $48,000? Because 10% of the calls could be higher emergency type calls with a greater fee that you may not be able to recoup. Is that true?
No, because we're only allowed to bill at a certain rate. We can only
So-
bill to a certain amount.
So
If
you
we
only-
we're only allowed to bill to what the state allows our maximum rate. And that's
So
what
if
we
you do
bill
an
at.
expensive call and you can only bill to a certain rate, then what is that loss? How do you categorize that loss at the fire department or the ambulance service?
Honestly, it's very hard to do because it'll be a month from now before we even know what that bill is, or what that cost came in or how much they paid in. And some people take 6-8 months to pay their bills.
Right, or you don't collect at all
Correct.
because
There are some that we don't collect at all.
right, and that's because when you're a public service, you're supposed to be able to rely on the tax dollars that come in that aren't coming in from Union.
Not necessarily, but yes, that's how it is set up here.
Okay, thanks.
Chief, just so you know, I did email that.
Thank you.
What was just on the screen, I emailed to.
Thank you.
Is the bad debt any different between Wellington and Union? I mean, it could be more than 10% if more Union folks with bad debt and didn't pay. Are they slower? Is there any analysis of payments from?
In all honesty, our collection rate to Union is higher than it is in Wellington.
Thank you.
Pete?
Yeah, I just.
Your little blue hand up there. I missed it before.
That's okay. I'm patient. The one thing on the bullet points that I'd like to discuss is the next to last bullet point that says that town's emergency services payroll is exclusively due to an ambulance service. I believe that we've heard in a number of discussions with Chief Moore that the ambulance service is part of the reason we're paying for 24-hour service, 24/7, 2 people, is because these people are also first on the scene for fire calls. They're bringing fire equipment. So I'm not sure the word exclusive is applicable there.
Correct. They're not.
And that we should probably not be looking at, just 10% of what we're paying, 10% was, I think part of that cost should be absorbed by the town for fire service, even though it's under the ambulance payroll. And I understand that there's probably no way to effectively suss out exactly what those percentages are. But I still think that the amount of zero from the town of Union doesn't cover it.
Pete, I just want to respond to that, if that's okay. That you're probably right. Exclusively is probably a word that you shouldn't use too often. But what that means is the only paid staff we have in our emergency services is the ambulance crew. They may be doing firefighting work, you know, and being first on the scene.
Right.
Saying that's not a useful thing at all. What it's saying is payroll wise, we only have paid ambulance people. We don't have paid fire chiefs. We don't have
But what I'm saying, Stephanie, is that's the title. That's not the actual job. So that's why I don't like the word exclusively there. And I do think that we should probably not use those numbers as hard numbers when there is that legal factor of firefighting in there.
We can say largely. And then
largely would make me much happier.
This isn't going out for publication really, but and then the other thing is the parenthetical already supports that it's not exclusive, because we pay the fire marshal and we pay the emergency management director. So that, and those are both emergency services people, so.
Other board discussion. I'll point out on the agenda, it does also include the CCM research report.
Mike, just a quick question for you. Were you able to schedule anything with the first selectman in Union? I know you had been trying to set something up.
No, that was because the motion was made at the last meeting for this conversation to be adjourned to this meeting. I mean, tabled, I'm sorry, until this meeting.
Okay.
And the board had not specifically directed me or said, let's set up the next meeting. You know, that's potentially a conversation for tonight, but nothing happened in between.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We'll move to the CCM data.
Kind of garbled, Matt. What did you say?
Can we move a little bit to review that CCM data on what other towns and municipalities are doing in terms of ambulance service?
Yep, that's all part of this conversation. Yep. Do we want to screen share it?
I'd be interested in doing that, yes.
Marissa, are you ready for that? Yes, you are. Thank you.
That was really good. So I looked at this and I thought I didn't see, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I could be wrong, but I didn't see any that were a situation where similar to ours, where a town is receiving ambulance service from another town and not paying any portion of it. I could be wrong. Maybe I missed it. I didn't, I got this.
Is that one at the top one, Mike?
Is that the one?
Well,
Tanya?
no, I'm sorry. The Killingly area, isn't that on here somewhere?
Weathersfield, that's my other town. Killingly does not bid out. Town pays an annual appropriation to a private ambulance company.
I'm thinking
Montville, private ambulance company. Monroe, bid out. AMR, it's an ambulance company. And that's it, right? There's just 2 pages, isn't it? Yeah, and then move up the page a little bit. Thank you. Ambulance service of Manchester for South Windsor. Move up again. Ridgefield's too far away. Move up again. And then we have that big long one. Who was that? They filled out.
East Haven.
East Haven, yeah. But I just, my only observation from this was I didn't see anyone that was in a similar situation, in a similar arrangement to what, Wellington and Union are in. I guess you can take it off the screen.
Can I just make a quick comment, Matt, if you don't mind?
Sure, go ahead.
My only comment about that report is I agree with you. It doesn't reflect anything like a Wellington or Union, especially Union being only 600 people. The sizes of those towns are much larger than what we're dealing with.
Yeah. Agreed.
But ironically, that's exactly 10% of Wellington's population. So the numbers.
What are you doing here? Did you get the meeting?
Uh-oh, Peter. Uh-oh, Peter. Peter, your mic is on.
We let her go home, Peter.
Oh, he's got, okay, you got it.
Muted him.
He's on mute, yeah.
Oh, it was Plainville. Plainville that's, I think, had some kind of, didn't it? Isn't that on that chart? I thought that it had, Plainville had some, it's paying, and I don't remember which town. I think they're paying Killingly, maybe 16,000. I wrote that note on a notepad. Maybe that's not in there.
Oh, is that on your monitor, the little note?
What's that?
Is that on your monitor, a little note on your monitor?
No, no, I was, no, it's not. It's old.
Oh, okay. There's Plainville.
See?
AMR, yeah.
Budget, it says 16,000 to the town.
Okay.
Oh, that's to AMR. I'm sorry.
The other thing I was shocked about, and maybe I can get some comments on this, and maybe it's not the right thing to bring up, but I'm looking at $16,000 for a small town to pay for ambulance service, and I look at Wellington and I see $600,000. This is the Board of Finance. Maybe we should be looking at this and understanding this and drawing a conclusion about how we should move forward. And to play Mike's common refrain, any discussion on that topic?
Are you asking me to discuss, what are you asking me?
Anyone. It does not just you, Mike. Anyone.
Okay.
What I think about that, Matt, is, to pay a fee to a private ambulance company is better at recouping their revenue, right? And they're better at streamlining their costs, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And they also cover a lot of different businesses besides just municipalities.
Yeah.
So they just have a greater hold on the whole emergency type of industry. But I think you hit it. Definitely. I think you're right on.
I think, I'm not an expert at running ambulances, so I'm not quite sure, but I look at the cost difference and it's stark and huge.
Population-wise, too, Plainville's about 3 times the size of Wellington.
Mm-hmm.
They have like 17,600, something like that.
But again, they do, they're a private business, so they have to be self-sustaining. So they have to get their revenue collected, and they can't rely on having a pot of money from Wellington taxpayers.
Yeah.
The other thing that's, I think, if it's okay, Mike, that's interesting about Union, and I think you guys know this, especially because there's so many first responders here, but it's, it's got the Bigelow Hollow and the Mashpog Lake right in, in the center of it, and that is, according to Tyler's, comments in the last meeting. I mean, the highway and Bigelow Hollow are half the calls. Plus, Bigelow Hollow's seen a lot more activity from people coming into that state park. And I think, and this is something we can look into, but I think Union does get pilot money for that state park, but it's not a huge amount, So.
They could transfer it.
Chief, I saw you raising your hand.
Excuse me, I just didn't hear what Matt's comment or question was. I didn't, I'm sorry.
No, I was just conversing. talking about the results of the CCM survey about how different towns and municipalities pay for and how much they pay, the volume of how much they pay for ambulance service. And it's very, very different from what we pay.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more board discussion?
I mean, as far as like next steps, I think that we should, I mean, I don't know if you need a motion, but I think that we should definitely continue the conversation, because I think we're just sort of talking about it now, but I think the crucial thing is to get the parties around the table. And in my mind, unless there's some reason not to do it, because it should be obviously Wellington 1 and Board of Selectmen representative, Board of Finance representative, and the first selectman of Union to talk about this issue, because no one's concluding anything yet, but it doesn't feel like something that should just continue without at least having a really good exchange of what is and what should be.
Stephanie, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, you just looked at how much towns are paying for ambulance service. Look at 5 or 8 or 10 or 15 of them, I can't remember. Some of them are very large towns and all that, but they all paid something, except for Union. They don't pay anything.
Stephanie, are you gonna, I think were you making a motion? Are you going to make a motion for a special meeting? Is that what you're going for?
Yeah, I mean, the question is, does the Board of Finance, I don't know about the protocol, if that's something that, the Board of Selectmen take the lead on, or if we recommend it. I would move that the Board of Finance recommend a special meeting with the aforementioned parties, the first selectman of Union, representatives from our selectmen, Wellington 1 officials, and representative from the Board of Finance.
We've already done this. This is exactly the motion that we made back in February. And it didn't happen.
So can we move to set up the meeting?
If you make that motion.
I move we pursue setting up a meeting with, do I have to name them again?
No, I got it.
I second.
Discussion on the motion.
I concur. Peter, do you have an opinion on that?
Who are you asking?
I just think that we should be moving forward. We should be having some kind of meeting. I don't have anything to add at this time.
Thank you, Peter.
Any other board discussion? All right, Marissa, let's vote.
The motion is to pursue setting up a special meeting with the aforementioned parties. Jeff,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Mike.
I'd like to abstain from the,
Abstain. Okay. That is 5 yes, 1 abstain. Motion passes.
okay. Does that conclude board discussion on this topic?
How would we move? Well, how do we move forward? I mean, who drafts? Who's that person share the draft with? Do we have a timeline, a deadline? What are your thoughts on those issues?
Board members?
I think that we need an initial meeting at least to see if there's
major roadblocks, where the discussion might lead on this, and before we set a timeline.
Elizabeth, do you have a thought on that?
Any other board discussion? Comments?
I think Peter is probably thinking along the right lines because we haven't really, I don't think there's been all the parties at the table. At least the Board of Finance hasn't been at the table with anyone about it. And we're the ones that I think are kind of raising the question. So.
Any more discussion? All right, let's move on to new business. Item 1, ARPA fund appropriation. I'm trying to find, that was, why can't I find it?
You want me to start, Mike?
Yes, please go ahead, because
Thank you.
I've lost it somewhere in 3 screens.
Hopefully, I believe Mike shared with you a suggested motion that our business manager drafted based on the discussion. So the Board of Selectmen approved to expend certain ARPA funds. And I apologize, I wrote Board of Finance instead of Board of Finance. At our selectmen's meeting, there was an error in the selectmen's meeting that wasn't caught until preparing the documents for this meeting, in that we, as a Board of Selectmen, approved 92,000, but spelled out the dollars for every project. So if a motion passes this board with the correct dollar amount, the intent at Monday's Board of Selectmen meeting before a town meeting would be called is that we would correct our bottom line. So we're asking for an appropriation of the American Rescue funds for the following: the completion of meeting room equipment for $23,500. That will equip the room upstairs with microphones and speakers because of the size of the room and the acoustics in the room, to be able to hear in the event we hold hybrid meetings, which some boards are moving forward with. $3,000 for additional hybrid meeting equipment for our smaller rooms. We're looking at the OWL camera system. And Mike, you asked the question when we were talking about this in a previous meeting, whether or not we could purchase the equipment and then go back and reimburse with ARPA funds. Donna did not feel that was the appropriate way to handle it. But I will tell you that the school had some additional funds that they could use to purchase for their own use, and that we may be able to share those sooner because they'll have them a little bit sooner. So we'll have adequate resources. $57,000 for cleaning of the basement and pouring of the concrete floor. $35,000, the air conditioning, a replacement of all 4 units at the senior center. Steph, to your point, we're looking to use, ARPA funds for that. And $2,500 for additional air purifiers for the town office building. It's a total of $123,500. Again, I apologize, the Board of Selectmen approved these items with these dollar amounts, but used the wrong bottom line figure of $92,000. Beyond that, we're looking at the next item, which will be asking for a representative from this group to serve on a working group to bring forth projects and potential uses, including revenue loss.
Okay, for the sake of maintaining our agenda, I move that the Board of Finance recommends that the Board of Selectmen call a town meeting to appropriate $123,500 from the American Rescue Plan Fund for the purpose of air conditioning replacement at the senior center at $35,000, remote and hybrid meeting room electronic equipment at $28,500, town office building cleaning and concrete $57,500, and town office building purifiers, $2,500.
Second,
Discussion?
The second to last bullet that you read off, Mike, that was for concrete at the town office building?
Yes, that's the basements. That's the project sealing the basement floor where the humidity and the mold has been a problem.
Because our air handler is down there, this actually will free up CI money in CIP, but not in the budget. It was LoSiP project funds. It was off budget dollars.
Understood, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion?
We just get a recap of the actual dollar amount we did receive from this fund.
$867,727.11.
From this perspective, it looks like you're looking into the horizon.
Oh, I am. It's out there in the great beyond. I have it written on a board right behind my desk.
I figured, I just thought it was cute.
It looks like you're reading it off the front of the old town hall.
Yeah, you can see the code there.
Now, that's the total?
No, that's half. The other half comes next.
Okay. Okay, that's,
it's the
So
total
there's-
is 1.7, right? Million.
Yeah, the total's 1.735 million
okay.
and change.
So this leaves about 740 still to go out of this chunk of money.
Correct. And it leaves a total of 1.6 million total. So this is just a small portion. And I anticipate that working group bringing forth larger projects, including making sure the priority for the selectmen is helping individuals and small businesses to begin with.
Okay, any more discussion? Let's vote.
Pete,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes,
Jeff,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
6 yes, 0 no, motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, Erica, ARPA Fund Committee Representative.
Yeah, so right now we've asked for a working group that consists of a staff member representing EDC and PZC, Board of Finance, and myself. Oh, and I apologize, and our Human Services Director. And so we would like a representative of Board of Finance.
Do we have someone on the board here who is interested in taking on that role?
I will.
Matt Clark? Anybody else?
You need a nomination because I'll nominate Matt.
Why don't you do that, Peter?
I just did.
Yeah, is this,
Okay.
do you know what night this would be on?
We were actually, except for this member, it would all be staff. So we were really hoping we would be able to work these during the day when our staff is
Morning?
available. Is that an option for you?
Morning?
Morning? I'm sure we all work all day, so,
Yeah. Yeah, morning is good for me.
okay.
Thank
And Matt, we can talk about it. We do have the ability to go hybrid, so if you couldn't be in the room, we certainly could adjust that. So thank you.
I second that.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right, any other nominations? I don't sense any more. Let's vote, Marissa.
Jeff,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes,
and does Matt vote?
doesn't matter.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he can vote.
You wanna
Matt,
vote, Matt? Why don't you enter your vote into the record, Matt?
Yes, yes, I'll do that. yeah.
Okay, good.
6 yes, motion
That
passes.
makes you a willing co-conspirator.
Right.
Thank you.
All
No,
right,
I could represent finance and EDC. I mean,
So right now, you could, absolutely, and Mike D'Amato will be part of that conversation. So he's certainly got the pulse on all of those areas.
I don't want you adding your salary that we're paying you to represent us to the EDC salary. That'd be double dipping.
salary, what's that?
Aren't we all getting paid for this? Okay, next
SIP.
item on the agenda, School Building Committee Consultant Funds Appropriation. We heard a little bit before from Catherine, the School Building Committee Chairperson. Let's see if she is still here. Catherine, do you want to say any more on this?
Yes, I would like to, sorry.
Go ahead.
Trying to find my, my unmute button.
Go ahead.
So I'm not sure if the information that was shared regarding what, you guys are probably wondering what would you use the funds for?
I did pass on the email,
Okay,
Catherine, to the board members, and we do have a suggested motion language from Erica as well. So we have a good start.
Okay.
I won't take credit that I forwarded along, but that came from our business manager,
Okay.
from the CIP request.
yeah, so yeah, basically what I was saying earlier is that we need these funds to help the committee hire professionals so that we can take next steps in the process. And whether those next steps are for a new school or for evaluating and the existing schools. But we need to know what our next steps are, and we need to hire consultants to do that. And so, as Mike said, you guys have the language. The consultants that we hired, the ones that I listed, are not every single one that we're going to hire, but at a minimum, we would like to hire a owner's project manager, and any of the other consultants that we need to hire as part of this process. It is a lengthy process. There's multi-layers, and there's a lot of items that have to happen at the same time. This does not determine that we're going in one direction or the other. It's really to help us define what direction we're going to go. So I really hope the committee members will consider appropriating the funds that we're asking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I just want to, staff, hang on a second. I just want to make one comment because I am the Board of Finance rep to the School Building Committee. A shining and time-sensitive example of what this will allow the committee to do is, as the committee is wrestling with multiple layers, as Catherine said, of what direction this may go, one of the things the committee has to do, they have to look at, if we were to rebuild or build, is the land we are on already appropriate, or is there other land the town owns that's appropriate, or is there land that's on the market that's appropriate? And one of the things that would be happening in short order is a consultant might be brought in to do an initial evaluation of land. Even the existing land, for example, that Hall School is on, what are the wetlands concerns, things like that. So that's just a very general example of why it's needed now, and why it's part of helping the committee decide what direction to go. Regardless of the end option, we need to start studying what we can do now. Steph?
I just wanted to move that the Board of Finance recommends that the Board of Selectmen call a town meeting to appropriate $100,000 from the Reserve Fund 04-4041 to allow the building committee to hire the necessary consultants to pursue the building of a preschool through 8th grade school.
I second.
Okay, any more discussion on the motion?
Yes. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I watched the video for that meeting, and I was very disappointed, extremely disappointed. I watched the video, and the appropriation of money for consultants was not an agenda item in that meeting. And the board, the school building committee discussed it was not an agenda item for this meeting and decided not to move forward with going to the Board of Finance for $100,000 because I think because it wasn't the right thing to do. Then They went into you guys went into executive session. And immediately upon coming out of executive session, there was a motion to spend to approach the Board of Finance for $100,000 for consultants. I don't know what changed because that was in executive session. It's not, I don't think it's appropriate for boards and committees in the town of Wellington to be not letting people know when they're going to be spending money and making decisions to spend money, and not letting the townspeople know through an agenda item that says we're going to be discussing this. I think it's out of place. I would urge you to go back, have another meeting, put it on the agenda, have the people and have notice to the people. I thought that was something that we were supposed to do. And I was, like I said, I was shocked. You should watch it. It's really, it's on.
Steph, go ahead.
I just want to clarify that this was a part of the CIP process and it was in the budget that we passed. So you know, I don't think the issue itself and the nearness of our needing to appropriate this money, it should be a surprise to anyone. We've talked about it many times and all through the budget process and on CIP and in other meetings. The school building committee has. So I understand what you're saying about protocol, and I can't speak to that because I wasn't at that meeting. But I do feel the need to move forward on this because I think we got a slow start, frankly, on getting the school building committee up and running. And I don't see any reason to put the brakes on the process, especially when a very competent chair is asking us to do this.
Mike?
Go ahead, Pete.
I just wanted to build on what Matt was saying. I've just read the minutes from that meeting, and although they have not been approved, the minutes reflect exactly what Matt said, that it was deemed inappropriate to move that until after the executive session. Then I believe that it may be an error in the minutes, but then it says there's nothing in the minutes saying that this was ever approved. It said there was some kind of talking points, something that was approved, even though that had nothing to do with the previous discussion in the minutes. So I'm a little confused by the minutes, but I do want to say that you've got to, if you're going to talk about spending $100,000, which I realize that I may be alone in thinking is a lot of money, that you've got to warn the town before the meeting, not during the meeting, that you're going to be asking for that appropriation. This is when the initial town meeting was held, we were most assured that we would have plenty of notification before there was any spending of money, and that all we were doing is looking into it at this point. We were not spending money, and that we would be notified, and that each thing would come to a town vote. And I realize that's what we're talking about here, but I don't think it came to us appropriately.
I'd just like to comment on that again, since I'm the Board of Finance rep to the school building committee. I do understand how it appears perhaps a little out of order, but having the purview of participating in the executive session in an appropriate way of running a meeting, the executive session begot the recommendation to the committee for the appropriation. I believe that process is proper. I understand why it looks a little, when you don't have the purview of being in the executive session, I realize it does not look necessarily.
Not having the purview of executive session is exactly the reason of executive session.
Right. But having participated in the executive session, essentially when the question came up before the executive session, it was just essentially out of order in logic. It was out of meeting order because the question came up because someone was looking to make sure we did it, that we made the motion. And essentially we couldn't make that motion because it wasn't on the agenda, because it was something that would potentially drive out of the executive session, which is what happened. Again, as this has been discussed with other of these recommendations to the selectmen, we are recommending that the selectmen call a town meeting so that the people can talk about it. We're not spending any money tonight. We're just asking the selectmen to gather the townspeople to get their permission. So there'll be plenty of warning.
This has happened before. Yeah, this has happened before in other situations. You know, the people of Wellington should be able to have their say and be warned at every step along the process when we're going to be spending money at the committee level, at the Board of Finance, at the town meeting. This is another situation. It's like, okay, well, you know, it really didn't work out well that time, but they'll have more opportunity later on. I'm sorry, I don't agree. That's my opinion. I don't agree. So.
Well, we have warned the people properly for this meeting. We are the Board of Finance. We warned the people.
I didn't say we didn't.
What's that?
I didn't say we didn't. I'm saying it's.
No, I'm just clarifying that. Our job tonight is.
There's no need to clarify it. I agree with you. You're right.
More discussion?
Okay, so what are we doing?
Just that, given that land is one of the things that you cited, Mike, and you know,
Yes.
oh, hello. When just you know, just since that's one of the things, and I'm sure there are other things too that are time sensitive on occasion. I think that that all the more reason that we don't want to slow walk it. That's my sense.
What did you discuss in the executive session? I don't quite understand.
You can't discuss it because it's executive session. That's why it's an executive session.
Discuss
You're keeping something from the people of Wellington. I imagine you're asking some reason why they can't do it. What is the reason? What is it? I don't understand.
Erica, we can clarify the reason for executive session, right?
Because in the thank you, Mike. So I wanted to echo most of what you said, but the item on the school building committee agenda was executive session to review of the site for potential land acquisition. Out of that discussion, and we cannot go into details of that discussion, led the motion that you that you received from Catherine to ask the Board of Finance to appropriate the dollars to go to town meeting, and why those would be used. The particular potential land acquisition we couldn't speak about, but out of the discussion came the motion. A motion cannot be made in executive session, Matt. That would be hiding everything from the townspeople. But there are reasons why certain things are in executive session, and then you come out and then you can make motions. And so now it's, if you appropriate dollars, you're then calling the townspeople forth to talk about what we would use that funds for, and it still wouldn't talk about what we discuss in executive session. That is still privileged, but it is the opportunity now for the townspeople to vote as to whether or not to give us this money.
I still find it was surreal. What I urge you to just watch it. It was just surreal. I've attended about half. I think we've had 7 meetings of the school building committee. I've attended 3 of them remotely. Once I was working and I just put in the earbuds and listened along. And I gave my opinion that the result of the school building committee should be 2 options for the people of Wellington, for them to choose between.
But they're going to have that opportunity.
They're not wrong.
Yes, they will.
They've never discussed it in my comments. Okay. That's not. This isn't the time or the place. So,
but
we move on.
Matt, these dollars will get us 2 options to the townspeople. That's what using these funds would get. No decision has been made, and it's our job, and we need assistance with that, and that's what the ask is for.
But just to clarify, the result of the school building committee will be 2 options or more options. Well, I think 2 for the people to consider, or will it be 1 option up or down?
So, all right. So hang on a second. We've got a bunch of students. So Matt, the result of the school building committee is not defined at this point.
Right.
So it will not necessarily be 2 options or 1 option or 10 options. That's not, the school building committee has not made a decision that that's how they're going to present it, because this is so early in the process. Lisa?
I just want to point out that what Stephanie said, I think was beautiful, that, you know, these people are appointed. We all just appointed Matt to a committee. We appoint these people to these committees because we entrust them because they are actively involved in the town. So, I mean, at some point, I think you have to go with that. The other part is that, so, I mean, all of this conversation's been going on all year and there's nothing that's really hidden. So I just want to point that out. I'm sort of kind of shocked that Peter and Matt would say such a thing.
Who's, what? Who? I'm the only one that said anything. Are you talking about Peter Latinsa?
No, Pete Tanaka made similar comments.
I understand.
Okay. Any more discussion on this motion? No? Matt, were you saying something? I'm sorry.
Yeah, is this, what's this, do we have any idea exactly what these consultants are, who they are and what they'll be doing?
No, because there's no opportunity just to do a proposal or a hiring or anything until there's approval first to get the funds.
Okay. So there's been no RFP, request for proposals.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there will be some sort of a municipally compliant purchasing process. Some consultants are potentially accessible through pre-approved purchasing agreements already, and some will have to be put out through some sort of a public bid or proposal process. Any more discussion on the motion? Let's vote.
Okay. The motion is for the $100,000 from the reserve fund to allow the school building committee to hire contractors or consultants. Jeff?
No.
Stephanie?
Yes.
Pete?
No.
Lisa?
Yes.
Matt?
Oh.
Mike?
Yes.
3 yes, 3 no. Motion fails.
All right. So those who voted against it, what do you propose?
Mike, if I could go, the first thing I'd like to see is I'd like to see an agenda for the school building committee. Mention that they are going to be voting on $100,000. And 2, I'd like to see something like a bullet point list on the types of consultants you're considering hiring. And if you can't hire consultants without a consultant, then perhaps we can start with a much lower dollar amount. The sunk costs into this project start driving it in one direction or the other. And I don't think you need $100,000 for a consultant to decide what you need for consultants. Let's start out smaller and go up that way. That would be my suggestion.
So I think some of your comments are in order. I'm not sure that our board has the right to direct another town committee on
No, they don't.
their meeting.
That's fine, Mike. I'm not directing them. I'm telling you what they need to do to get my yes vote. They don't have to do it. Believe me, I understand that.
So that leaves basically what we're saying is we don't have a right to tell you to change how you conducted your meeting, but we're not going to approve it unless you change how you conducted your meeting.
Well, I'm just saying $100,000 is a lot of money. If we don't even know what we're spending the money on, we're just blindly giving $100,000 for assorted consultants. My answer is no. If you say we need a consultant to decide what we need for consultants, land use, you don't have to tell me where the land is. I understand that that's very important. But I do need something a little more solid than we're going to spend $100,000 on assorted stuff, give us the money and trust us. That's not going to happen.
Well, the communication did talk about the types of consultants, and Catherine did repeat it in her comments to us.
Yeah, generally speaking, we're gonna have this kind of consultants. I haven't seen any paperwork saying we need a consultant to determine what consultants we need. We haven't determined what our process is for a request for proposal. What we're essentially, the way it looks to me on that, on the minutes from that Board of Buildings Committee meeting, was we went into executive session, we want $100,000. That's all that reflects. Now, I understand completely that I have no right to know what went on in that executive board meeting and executive session, nor do I want to know, because I have too much stuff that I deal with now. But I do need to have something more concrete than we went into executive session. Trust us, we can spend your $100,000 appropriately. I need to see something a little more concrete than that.
Stephanie?
Yeah, I feel like we've lost the trail a little bit on this, because this was a program submitted to the CIP. There are specifics in the program request for that. You can go back and visit that, Pete. But it's not saying we're going to spend $100,000 out of the chute. It's saying that's a pot of money to appropriate for a variety of consultants that we may need through this process. And I have experience with this because it's exactly what the town did for Unwillington, when the town decided to put a certain appropriation aside to hire consultants to look into some of the things that in that case were not as foreseen even as a school building committee might have. But you don't know what you're going to need expertise for.
Yeah, and Stephanie, to stay on consistent with my own beliefs, I believe I voted no on that as well. So
I understand, Peter. I'm just saying, I think it's not like it's not known, and what we're talking about is going to a town meeting and letting the people of the town vote on whether they this is a reasonable appropriation.
I understand that, Stephanie, and I've heard that before. I've also just been told that we should trust our board members to do what they think is appropriate. That's exactly word for word what I just heard, and that's what I'm doing now.
Committee members.
Committee members, yes, as I am.
It's different.
Okay. Well, in the case of what the town did when, with the other issue, was there was a steering committee on dealing with the money, and they did not spend all of it. The town did not spend all of it. And it was chaired by Ed Taman, and it went very smoothly, and it made a big difference. So
I want to say something.
Go ahead, Lisa.
sometimes you got to call in the experts.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the Board of Finance is supposed to be an oversight and a watchdog, not necessarily the person or the five that say how we're going to spend all the money. The boards decide how we're going to spend all the money, and we are the oversight.
Absolutely, and I believe I'm doing my oversight.
I think you're a showstopper. That's what I think.
Well, stopping is sometimes a part of oversight.
All right, so I'm gonna, in an effort to give the school building committee something to get started with to continue their work and to keep on schedule, I'm gonna make a motion for a lesser amount and see. I move the Board of Finance recommends to the Board of Selectmen to call a town meeting to appropriate $30,000 from the Reserve Fund 04-4041 to allow the building committee to hire necessary consultants to pursue the building of a preschool through 8th grade school.
Yeah, we changed that to we have to have something about evaluate. Right now it says to build a school. There's nothing in there about remodeling, renovating, looking at the current properties.
Because that's the charge of the school building committee. So legally we have to use that wording. That's how the school building committee was charged by the Board of Ed. We have to use that wording.
I'm going to second because we're already discussing.
Thank you. Erica, did you have a comment?
The charge is to bring together and a consolidation, whether that be a new build or a renovation, but it was defining a pre-K through 8th grade school, Matt. So the language that was brought to you was drafted by our business manager that came directly from the CIP request. So the motion did not come from, the wording of the motion did not come from the SBC. It was a result of the request to CIP that had been approved.
Yeah, I watched the meeting. I know it didn't come from CIP. I just, as Susan from the SBC. I don't know, I just wish it had, this was an even, I've attended those meetings and it seems to me that every single thing that is talked about is new. And I don't feel as though we're getting, I apologize. That's not the work of this committee. So if there's no way to change this to renovate and build, then fine, we'll just leave it building.
I didn't hear what you just said, Matt.
I know, Matt, you need a new computer.
Yeah, I vote we appropriate some money for Matt to get another.
A microphone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I apologize. The next time around, I will wear my earbuds and microphone, so I apologize. I've gotten that before. So since I semi-retired, I don't, yes. So my work computer was great. It was wonderful.
Don't be penny wise and pound foolish.
Oh, I'm good at that, Elizabeth.
All right, let's focus, people here.
Could you repeat what you just said, Matt, at the end of your comments?
Yeah, I apologize. So if there's no way for us to work the word renovate into this motion, then fine, we'll leave it building, I guess.
Mike, do you have any understanding just by being on that committee about the figure of 30,000? Or I know you're trying to come in low, but why 30?
No, I think that it's just to give the opportunity for them to get started because the school building committee had stuff to discuss in executive session that is about doing some of the early learning on what directions are available to us, such as the examples I gave of understanding what are the wetlands restrictions of the Hall School property, for example.
Okay.
And so if this is pushed off, to another school building committee meeting, and then back to Board of Finance, and then out to the town, maybe there's a few weeks of time lost. The committee is just trying to keep marching forward and get to, the committee's gonna have to present something very detailed to the townspeople, and they're gonna have to discuss what options they have recommendations for or don't based on some very factual data if they're asking people to spend money. And they just wanna get moving on this stuff. And for example, of land that the town ended up deciding they were interested in, time is clearly of the essence in how you pursue land or negotiate on property, and needing to be able to say, if we're going to ask the townspeople to reserve money for a piece of land, we need to tell them why it's a good idea.
Thank you.
Any more discussion on the motion? All right, Marissa, let's vote.
The vote is for $30,000. Pete?
Otherwise the same, yes.
Yeah, otherwise the same. Pete?
No.
Stephanie?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Jeff?
No.
Matt?
No.
Mike?
Yes.
3 no, 3 yes. Motion fails.
All right, any other wisdom from the board before I move on?
Well, it isn't about the amount.
No.
Can we put it on the agenda for the next meeting?
It's
a month away.
It's got to go back to apparently it's got to go back to the school building committee at this point. All right, let's move on. Treasurer position discussion. I think you all have probably reviewed the information. There has been discussion of how we remake or do we remake. And to be honest with you, I think the treasurer position is critical in the Board of Finance's work. I'm not sure what purview we have. So let's discuss some thoughts.
Mike, I'm sorry, I tripped on my words there. I slipped a gear. You're right. The town treasurer is vital to this board, and the job that they do is vital to this board. I think that we should. There's been a lot of discussion on how that job can and should change, and I think that we just need a representative to discuss that, and so that it's not something that's thrust upon us, but rather something that we can see coming.
Where do you envision that representative would go?
There must be some kind of decision on job description. Where's that job description coming from, and can we help form that?
Erica, do you have any input, or can you comment?
Yeah, I mean, you didn't get this from the a request from the Board of Selectmen because we weren't prepared. We're still working on creating a new position in the finance office and haven't finalized a job description that would be for an assistant business manager that would take away the duties that should not. This board had talked about separation of duties from the treasurer, and this creation will do that, along with adding additional layers to the finance office. In the event someone is out, there is everything down there is a single point of failure right now, which is not good at all. So this will help address that, and then will help address the accounting side, finance office side of those items that fell into the treasurer's position that should be separate. And so we're looking at, not looking at changing, but making sure that the discussion that began some time ago really can actually happen, and that we create a finance office position to do the finance side of this. And then the treasurer stipend would be lessened and would be increasing in a position. So we're not done with our work, which is why you didn't get a request for this item coming from the Board of Selectmen.
Peter?
Yeah, I'm going to say something that's going to probably shock people. I'm in 100% agreement with Erica. However, I do want to have some input prior to the finalization of that. I think that this board should have some review process into whatever those job descriptions are. But I do think that the motivation is exactly right on changing this. I just don't want to be given a fait accompli that says this is the job descriptions, this is the way you're going to do it. I just like a shot at a review prior to finalization.
Could I?
Stephanie, go ahead.
It's kind of hard to hear today. I just wanted to ask something informational because I couldn't get the zip file open. And that is, what exactly are, because we just dived in talking about this job, and I'm not really sure what the framing is. So could you just give me a brief framing so I understand?
So my understanding of it is, as we learned over the last couple of years, and including during the time that Mrs. Bullock took over in the treasurer's position, there was a lot of discussion about single points of failure, as has been commented on already here tonight, and definition of duties, and also creating a situation where someone who assured something was done a certain way wasn't also the person who did it a certain way, so that there was perhaps purview, checks and balances. And that was the early genesis of this conversation. And then the materials that were sent to the board and emailed out to the board are sort of a continuation of that conversation, and a concern that this board should be involved in that, which I think is what we're talking about. And I guess if we could get a commitment from Erica that she's willing to come back to us before she releases that job description out to the world, I think that might help us participate and understand what the changes are that they're making.
Absolutely. You know, it'll be discussed again at our selectmen's meeting on Monday night. It would be the new position created. Again, we're not creating or changing the treasurer job description. We're just making sure those duties are separate so that the person entering all of the items isn't the same person reconciling everything. And our current model just really doesn't allow us to completely do that. It also allows us to be assured that we have someone in that role with a skill set to be doing those jobs. And I think that's really important. So it will minimize the work of the treasurer to what it should be. And the treasurer job description is determined by state statute, not necessarily the town of Wellington. So those items that are required will not change, but absolutely the job description will have to go through the union. So it's not even the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance that gets the final say. It has to be approved by the union as it would be a union position in the town. So I encourage you to be part of that conversation, but because we're not done with our work is why you didn't get an item to be put on your agenda by the Board of Selectmen. And I said that at our last meeting that we would take this discussion up further as we completed our work. We're just not done yet.
What is the key, you know, the key responsibility that's set up as it's set out in the statute? Can you?
I don't have that in front of me. I apologize.
Is it a
but it's
is it
the I'm sorry?
Is it a series of things or is it one key thing that a town treasurer?
There's a couple of items, but we certainly really have the treasurer doing all of the things. You know, at one point they were collecting the funds, entering the funds into journal entries, and then reconciling. So it was mixed up in one individual. And for years, the auditors have been telling us this has been going on many, many years, I'd say even, you know, decades of the fact that we should be changing the way we conduct this business. And so we're doing that. And with our setup, it means the creation of an additional staff member, but with that, it gives us some additional layers of protection in the finance office in the event someone is out on vacation, someone is hurt and has to be out, which we experienced this winter, and no one else to do their job. So it will cover that, but really take away those duties. So the treasurer is not doing all of the revenue pieces in the finance office.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any more discussion or questions on this? Erica, we look forward to, oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, no, I was just going to add, you know, it comes down to it's hard enough to get people to run for something in a regular position. This is something that the treasurer has to be really a specific skill set. And as things get more and more complex with municipal finance, it becomes harder and harder to maintain not just a competent person, but a person. So,
It's true. And really they're a separate department. They're a separate department head. It's an elected position. So there's no requirement of hours. And we're asking them to do really finance department work. So it's important that I think the most important thing we do is to separate those items out. And that was the discussion that was brought to the Board of Finance several years ago. And so now we're really working to do that.
Was there any discussion, Erica, about just going to a full professional position versus a hybrid?
Instead of an elected treasurer, you mean? We did have a little bit of that discussion, and I think the selectmen felt that it was important to be able to keep that as an elected office. And so this was a way to do that. Regardless of whether it was an elected position or not, we still need to have the separation of those duties. So it made sense to keep the elected official model and someone separate in the finance office, because we still were looking at two individuals to do this work.
I only asked because I just, in the years that I've been involved in this kind of thing, it's always a wrench in the works. It's always scrambling for, candidates. The parties sort of cross endorse or whatever. And, it's just tricky because it's such a professional, it's becoming, like Jeff said, it's a higher and higher level of professionalism now than it might have been 40 years ago.
I think you'll see the overall work that we're proposing of the treasurer would be many fewer expected hours in a week. And you'll see the proposal we bring forth to bring the stipend that they receive considerably less to match that amount of time, because the individual in the finance office will be doing that work. And that's part of completely separating those duties.
Thank you.
You're muted.
And then does that shift the revenue over to the non-elected position so you can find the talent?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Right, then it's easier to find someone with a skill set as opposed to, the requirements for an elected official. And I know the parties in town really do their best to find someone who has that skill set, but at the end of the day, it's determined by voters, and it's, may not necessarily be on their ability within the financial world.
Right. This is what you've experienced.
Yes.
We experienced.
Okay. I think we've beat this pretty well. Let's move on to meeting delivery method. I hope everyone on the board reviewed the implementer language and the comments that guide us into our various options for how to hold meetings. So let's get some discussion going.
I would like to start the meeting in person again.
You would like to start meeting in person, you said?
Even if we have to go hybrid, I'd rather be in person.
No, I concur.
I see no reason why we cannot meet in person.
Now, if I can just find that document. All right, here we go. Okay, so to the option that you two. Okay, so in that discussion, either option 2, which says any agency that conducts an in-person only meeting shall provide members of the agency the opportunity to participate by means of electronic equipment. However, the agency is not required to adjourn or postpone the meeting if a member loses their connection, unless they are required for quorum. So we could go to in-person meetings, and if one of us on the board requests to be remote, we would have to provide the electronics to make that happen. We'd have to provide the electronic access. It doesn't mean, I don't think it means that we have to bring the electronics to that person's house. I think we just, but I see Erica going, I don't know.
Well, really, if the member requested, so if you had a board member that didn't have access, you would then have to provide them not only the means, but in equipment and the means in a virtual link.
The means and the methods.
So we could offer Mike.
I was going to say something, but you beat me to it. So stop stealing my thunder there. Okay?
All right, Stephanie, you had a question?
So there is like an option to go hybrid.
Yep.
I just want to speak up for that, because to keep our options open, because, we just heard, I mean, I just feel like there's still like moving elements about the pandemic, but more important, I think, is that we've enjoyed greater participation by the public with doing the Zoom meetings. I think if there were a hybrid option, I would hope that the board members might decide to show up in person, but on occasion, there may be a reason, it may make it easier for them to be at more meetings to have the hybrid option. But, because I agree that the face-to-face, I think, is good for doing board business. I prefer it too. But I don't think that we should cut off our options. And I also just really think it's important from the public standpoint, because it's just been much greater participation. Nothing better than having the public be more engaged and educated about what's going on in town. So I'm a hybrid chick.
Lisa,
Hybrid chick.
any other comments on the Matt?
I just want to say one more thing about.
Hang on, I just recognized Matt.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is
Matt,
there
go
a way
ahead.
is there a different way we can go about this? And we have people that want to do hybrid and we have folks that want to do in person. I get it. My concern is that if we offer either hybrid or in person to us, all of us, we stand the chance of getting one group of people over here in person, and another group of people over here via computer. Right now, and that would be different. That would be different than what we've experienced over the past year. Over the past year, we've experienced, Hollywood Squares, and it's worked out okay. I truly miss being able to talk to people. We've had our technical problems. I'm in favor of, but I would like to see if we can possibly have some kind of a rule within our board that says we should all try and be there in person, us, and the rest of it be hybrid. Is that something we can discuss?
That's what I was gonna add because I think that each board gets to kind of decide how it's going to conduct business, and we can decide that among ourselves. And I would favor something like that.
But
I think
what
we can
about-
make an internal decision or at least a strong recommendation that all board members show up for the in-person portion of the hybrid and leave the public with the ability to be in the hybrid because it does allow greater accessibility.
I think that would be a good idea. I'm sorry, Lisa, you were next.
I just was going to say, I mean, for those of us that are, still actively employed an hour away, sometimes if you have the best intentions of arriving at 7, but you can dial in and then walk in, I mean, that would be the intention. I have every intention to be loyal and committed to the board, but there are nights where I get pulled and I still want to be able to listen and hear. And I don't want to be docked because I can't get there,
No, and I think I
have to work so I can pay taxes.
That's a great example. There's some people who would have something else, like, even if they've got to be out of town, maybe they would still consider dialing up for the meeting. And
I mean, like if you're out of town on business.
Board participation, really. Yeah.
All right. So I move that the Board of Finance uses the hybrid method for future meetings until further notice.
Second.
Discussion.
Thank you.
I think we discussed it.
I think we have. All right, Marissa, let's vote.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
6 yes, motion passes.
Can we all try and make it in person? I realize there's opportunities, places where you can't do it with traveling and stuff like that.
No, but I think being in person is an awesome idea. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, I can tell you that you should be able to hold your next one hybrid. I feel confident we'll secure the room based on the responses we've gotten from other boards and commissions.
All right, and how many hybrid rooms do we have right now available townwide? Just the one, right?
Just the one right now. If the funds that we asked for tonight through ARPA past town meeting, then we will be purchasing the other items. But I think I discussed that the Board of Education has purchased some of the similar equipment that will be used in smaller rooms. But your board should be okay on Thursday nights. Not many meet on Thursday nights, so I'll put you down as a hybrid right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, that concludes the new business and correspondence has been shared with everybody. Any correspondence we had went out. So let's go back to present to speak. So anyone who wants to come up in video first, turn your camera on, wave your hand.
Mike,
Yes.
I don't know if this is appropriate for me to speak during a public speaking, but I would like to add to the agenda in the next meeting, the roofs at the both schools. From what I understand from the minutes of the last school board meeting, both roofs are currently leaking, and we have appropriated money for that. And I'd just like a discussion on it at the next meeting. I just want to add it to the agenda. I don't want to have a discussion tonight.
Can you email, would you do me a favor and email that to me so I can make sure when I'm making the agenda 3 weeks from now that I don't forget that, please?
I will attempt to do that in my addled mind here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had that written on my notes too, Pete, that would be a good agenda item for the next one.
Wow.
Okay, anyone else in present to speak, please unmute, call out your name. Erica?
I wanted to give anyone else an opportunity. I want to say I'm disappointed that this board declined to move forward a discussion to the townspeople and town meeting for a CIP project for the school building committee, so that the school building committee can work to bring informed choices to the town, whether that be one choice, two choices, what that may be. That I heard members of this board talk about feeling like the public was left out of the discussion. You just took the discussion right away from townspeople, and town meeting is where they could talk about their uses and their concerns for information on the school building committee and what they might be using those funds for. So I'm a little bit disappointed.
Well said.
Any other present to speak?
Yeah,
Elaine?
Elaine Newcomb.
Hi, Elaine, go ahead.
Hi. Actually, I concur with what Erica just said, but I come at it from a little different direction, because Stephanie mentioned before, the Board of Finance recommends the Board of Selectmen call a town meeting to appropriate $100,000 to pursue building of a K-8 school. And it doesn't seem like there's a broad look. And when we had that town meeting a year ago, January, it was a different world than it is now. And the other thing that surfaces since then is apparently there is some land being considered without, it's like when you, your house isn't working for you anymore, and you say, are we going to remodel? Or are we going to go out and build a new house? And the first thing you assess is the resources and the amount of commitment you're willing to take on. And like I say, that I was at that meeting, there was more than one opinion at that meeting on a bitter cold January night. And it was a different world then. So I really would like to feel that if the town is going to spend money looking at the options, that it's a fair look at options and people understand what kind of commitment they may be looking at. And, we're a small town, and I also know, I've read about the push by the state for regionalizing things. And there was a very clear article in the Current several months ago, about probably 4 or 5 months ago now, about how they weren't going to consider anything for towns less than 25,000 people, and with a regionalized approach. So I think we don't have any kind of assurance that we're going to get the kind of reimbursement that some people might be thinking of. And the reimbursement, as I understand the presentation that Mr. Costa did, will not include land. So anyway, I think we need to have some real thought and discussion as to what track to go down, and not spend money that winds up not being productive. Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you.
Any other present to speak?
Phil Stevens, can I say something, Mike?
Go ahead.
So I just wanted to echo what Erica said, but I also wanted to add that this went through the Board of Finance already. It went through the voters already. It went through the voters at a town meeting. And to not pass something that an appointed committee, that's their job to do, was disappointing. I think the thing that I was most disappointed about is anytime you get something that's passed and then we don't hear feedback of how to move forward, that's frustrating. I think that the taxpayers approved $100,000 for consultants. You heard tonight what those consultants, some of the examples of what those consultants would be, yet it didn't go to town meeting and there was no suggestion. Even though I was disappointed when Mike said 30,000, I thought that would be a no-brainer, and it wasn't. And so I'm curious to know what you're sending back to the SBC with. You just said no, and that's it, because the questions you had about how's the money going to be spent, you got the list tonight. And so that was disappointing to me. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to make one clarifying comment. We typically don't engage too much during present to speak, but just to clarify Elaine's comment before, I think there's a misunderstanding about the land. The state reimbursement money will reimburse within their parameters and what they will review and approve. They will reimburse for some of the land costs. It's not true that land isn't reimbursed. It's something they review it. And for example, if you want to buy a huge piece, they may say you're buying so much more than you need. We're going to reimburse on a portion that we feel is reasonable. So that's just a clarification of fact.
Okay, I'll go back to my notes because that's not how I understood Mr. Costa. And I'll see what I have written down and whether I misunderstood or whether it was just a little ambiguous what he said.
Right. Thank you.
Mike?
Yes.
I understand that we don't engage. However, to respond to Phil, I thought I made it pretty clear what I was looking for a yes vote. I wanted it announced that they would be asking for money on an agenda so that people would have a chance to attend the meeting. And I want to have a clearer understanding of where the money's going. Assorted consultants is not clarifying enough for me. So if that helps any or doesn't.
If we're not engaging, then we're not engaging. This is present to speak. We're not conducting business now. So anybody else in present to speak?
Well, I just want to say that, that there has been quite a bit of process on this and on the school building committee decision. And I do feel like they're working really hard to look at all options. And I am really disappointed because, the discussion on that was mostly about the sum being asked for. A lot of it was the process of a certain meeting. But the sum seemed to be the sticking point. And, I feel like it would have been good faith and it would have been a positive message to the people working on the school building committee and to the townspeople that we just want to not be obstructionist and keep the process moving ahead by going with a much smaller amount.
And ignoring what the people voted for.
All right, we are not going to spend the whole night discussing this. We've already had our discussion on it. If you want to raise your hand as present to speak, then you have the right as a citizen to raise your hand. You can make a comment, but we're not going back and forth in discussion. Anyone else on present to speak? Okay, good and welfare. As always, I thank people for participating and working hard to try to do good things for the town. And I hope everybody is well and your basements aren't flooded.
I guess they broke ground this week on the Love's truck stop, right?
I saw signs going up, but I hadn't seen groundbreaking yet. So, Peter,
Move to adjourn.
Second,
second,
I got second.
second. All right, everyone say aye and wave.
Aye, bye.
Good night.
Aye.
Thank
Aye.
you. Looks unanimous.